trainings. Thank you very much. Your valuable time and also dedication. We are very honored to host you today. And I think lots of startups will inspire from your presentation and your experiences. And we are waiting for it. And stage is yours.
Okay. Can you put the slides up?
Yes,
Good morning, everybody.
Yes.
My name is Amy Cosper. I'm a writer and reporter specializing in entrepreneurship, global entrepreneurship. And this presentation is really not scientific. It is simply observations that I've had over the years as an editor-in-chief and as a reporter and a writer on entrepreneurship. And I think it's really, really important right now for us to come together, because we all need to be inspired at this particular time in world history. And there is nothing more inspirational than what you guys are doing as entrepreneurs, as founders, as people who are just, imagining new ideas and innovating. And so the most important thing, what I've learned is that, first of all, the topic of entrepreneurship and creativity is a uniting topic. It is something that we need to experience together, especially right now. And the most important thing as an entrepreneur or a founder or a VC or really anything in your life is to just start. And so I always lead with that. It's a quote from my friend James Victori, who is a very famous artist over here in the States. You can't accomplish anything if you don't start, if you don't take that first step when you're running, if you don't just take that first step with your startup, you just simply must start. Everything in life starts with that. And okay, so these are some of my life lessons. And if this is boring, we can stop and just have a conversation. But the second most important thing is to be aware of your ego and how your ego can trip you up. And there are a million stories out of Silicon Valley that point to the whole notion of ego really exceeding your business idea. And you can raise a lot of money, then you burn a lot of money, and then you fail. And there are thousands and thousands of stories like that. But I would caution you, as somebody who's experienced the ego problem, to be very aware as founders of your ego. And when you're going out to raise funding and go out and try to tell your story, get your ego out of the way. And here's my story. So when I left Entrepreneur Magazine, I took a year off, right? Actually, a few years to write a book. And when I left, I had spent so many years, 15 years, trying to climb to the top of the masthead. And, it's kind of an ego trip. You get kind of high off of getting, to the top, the editor-in-chief position. Well, when I left media because it was actually starting to really get on my nerves. But, when I left and the emails stopped coming and the story pitches stopped coming and nobody was really calling me, it really kind of bummed me out. And it was all a part of my ego. And once I got rid of that part, everything else came a lot more easily. Like I wrote a book, I'm working with startups around the world, but that ego problem is very common in startups, and especially in Silicon Valley, especially. So I kind of wanted to point that out. It will stop you before you start. So check your ego at the door. So this is another part of by the way, these are just little combinations of stories of my observations. They're actually chapters in my book. So when I left Entrepreneur Magazine, and media is just kind of a mess right now anyway, and people would ask me, okay, so you're not doing this anymore. So what do you do now? And I didn't have a good answer because I didn't know what to do. I simply did not know how to answer the question, which is, ironic for the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine to not have a purpose. And so it was a recurring theme, and it's tied into the ego thing. So I did a few things. By the way, there's a typo in this slide and it cracks me up, and I didn't change it because I kind of like it. know thyself. It's supposed to say know thyself, which is from the Oracle at Delphi. So getting to know yourself as a founder and as a human being is really good. Like, know what your talents are, know what you stand for, and go out there and you can have a lasting impact on the world. And, you know, part of my journey of getting to know thyself was, you know, I took a year, wrote one page of my book, 250 words, and I got on a motorcycle and I rode across Spain, and really kind of, you know, there was no ego. It was just me trying to find myself. I was very lucky that I got to have that time to do that, because it really helped me understand what I stand for and what, you know, how to answer that question. What do you do? Okay, so this is another thing I learned, and it's really important, you guys. This is a part of the whole culture of playfulness and learning and goofing off and letting yourself have fun. And why is that important? That is important because that is where your best ideas are going to be born. Goofing off, playing, riding a horse, riding a motorcycle, goof off. Let your mind wander. Let your mind create. And that's where your best ideas are born. If you sit in an office all day and you're not letting your mind free, you're not having your best creative ideas and moments. So, okay, but having said that, goof off within reason, because you can't goof off, you know, for the rest of your life. It is not a good business model. It's fun, and I've learned to embrace it, but do it within reason. And that's where your brain will start to get clear, and, you know, the ideas will come, and, you know, some of them will be good, some of them you can execute. But the most important thing is just letting yourself feel that kind of freedom. Get out of the office, in other words. Okay, so this part of the presentation is a little bit hard for me to talk about, but I'm going to try to get through this because there are lessons here. So 7 years ago, right here where I'm sitting in my studio, there was a tremendous, violent forest fire. And I was on a motorcycle in Santa Fe, which is 8 hours away from where I live. It was a terrible, terrible fire. And I had my helmet on, my husband and I both did, and we got a reverse 911 call, which is like the high holy what is going on call from the sheriff. And the call was, there is a fast moving forest fire. You need to evacuate immediately. Well, we were 8 hours away from, you know, being able to evacuate. So we were in the fire, and we lost everything: the house, the garage, all my cars, motorcycles, everything was gone. And we weren't even allowed to come back to the smoldering hole where our house was for 3 weeks after the fire. And I'm telling the story for a reason. So we came back up to the smoldering hole where we once lived, and it was a total wipeout. The horses survived, by the way. Like, we had horses, but they were boarded somewhere. And the Red Cross was standing around the burning hole, still, you know, kind of smoky. And they handed us a mask and these gloves, hazmat suit stuff, so we could dig through the remnants of our home and try to find things that survived, right? Like, nothing survived. I mean, bed springs. Like, bed springs have a very strange high tolerance for fire, apparently. But so my husband and I were digging around in the remnants and in the debris for a few days, like 4 or 5 days, and there's nothing. I mean, it's all gone. Like, I don't know. Like, we just kept going out there. And the reason I'm telling you that is because sometimes in life and in business, you need to know when to stop. Right? You need to know when to stop and when to rebuild. It's not bad to stop and quit and pivot. And so we did. We decided, were foolish and decided to rebuild our house in a fire-prone area. We stopped digging around, is what I'm trying to say. You just need to know when to stop looking for stuff that just is not there. So that's my fire story. It was a real defining moment for me. And what was born out of the fire thing and meeting with all of these entrepreneurs is that you got to find your voice. I know we talk a lot about find your voice, know what you stand for, and all of these softer science things. But when you find your voice, you will be able to tell your story better. And I am telling you, as a failed entrepreneur, somebody who's survived a fire, and I've interviewed millions of entrepreneurs, your story is your best asset, right? Like your story, and you need to be able to state it very clearly. Your story, you are your story, and you have to find your voice, and you have to know how to tell your story. And it only comes when you find your voice. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. And this is just a little story about how to stay alive. And it's a story that took place last year. My husband and I were out on a canoe in a very, very high mountain lake here in Colorado, like way, way, way up there. Dangerous, to go out in a canoe in those kinds of lakes. And I was the rowing person, right? So I was the one rowing the canoe, and he was fly fishing off the back of it. And it was fine. It was a beautiful day. We were having so much fun. And we're in the canoe, and I felt something pull me backwards. And it was my husband's hook. He hooked me in the cheek. And I was like, you have to get this thing out of me like now. And he panicked, stood up in the canoe, walked toward me to get the hook out. And as he did so, the canoe capsized. Everything. My wine fell out and floated away. The oars fell out, floated away. And we both tumbled out, and we were 2 miles away from shore, and the boat was upside down, and shit's just floating all over the place. And he comes to me and he sort of shakes me. He's like, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I'm fine. Let's go." He's like, "Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna swim underneath the canoe and flip it over, right? That's how this is gonna go down." And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, "Well, in Boy Scouts, I learned how to flip a canoe over." And I was like, that was 40 years ago. Like, I am not going to take advice, from 40 years ago, Boy Scouts, in Texas. And I looked at him and I said, "I am not going to do that. I will see you on shore." And I swam to shore, and, everything, he eventually made it back to shore. But the lesson I learned is that you have to stay calm. Like, even in the days that we're in right now, panicking is not going to do anybody any good. You could drown, you could fail your business, you can capsize governments, as far as I can tell. And so, the important thing is just, and these are just, again, just little anecdotes and lessons that I've learned, but just don't panic. And also, if somebody tells you to swim under a boat in a lake, tell them to pound sand. That is a bunch of horse pucky. Okay, so this is a story about leadership and about how to learn from things that you are uncomfortable with and things you do not relate to. So my daughter, who is, she's kind of like this badass, she's a hunter, she is a snowboard instructor, and she does things that I just simply don't do. I'm a vegetarian Buddhist. And so, that she hunts elk, it has always been something that was so foreign to me. Like, I never understood. Like, in Buddhism, we don't like to hurt things. We don't even like to squash a spider. But she goes out and she's got on the full Katniss Everdeen, war paint to go hunting for days, like for weeks, to hunt an elk. And, I've always tolerated it. And, last year, she got an elk with a bow and arrow, which is, I guess, like the high holy grail of hunting. And it's called archery. And she was very, very proud of herself. And she walked me through the story of it. And even though I was kind of like, "That's gross, you're gross," I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what's important to her. And as leaders, we need to be sure to keep our minds open to, what other people are experiencing, and that makes us better leaders. And I'll never shoot an elk with a bow and arrow, but I have a great amount of appreciation for what my daughter accomplished, even though, somebody called to talk to her, and I was like, Sophia can't come to the phone right now. She's boiling her elk head. And, it was a real turning point as a mother. So that's a little leadership story. And this is just, this goes without saying. And this is one of the mistakes I see a lot of entrepreneurs and startups and founders make, is not understanding who your audience is. Like, who are you serving? What is your tribe? What is your community? Because, an idea is just an idea, but the tribe is what makes it, something special. And there are millions of stories like that. Like, just know who your audience is. And, as a leader, the essence of who your audience is will come from you. And so you need to make sure that you have a laser-like focus when it's time to launch and when it's time to execute on your product, like who your audience is. There's a story behind this, but I think it's stupid. So the most important thing and the most important lesson I can impart is just start. In everything in life, just start. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And if you believe in something and you have a passion for your idea and your vision, just start. I mean, that doesn't mean be reckless about it, but you have to take that first step. And for people who don't take that first step, they will never know. I mean, there's a million ideas like that. So that is my little presentation. And I don't know, Brock, do you want to take questions, or how do you want to do this?
I have questions.
Okay.
So, beside the presentation, I wanted to ask more startup style things. You have already mentioned about lots of things about life and your life, and also very inspiring stories. I have written down that all these small notes, but I wanted to ask you more kinds of founder-like question. So you have been on the media for many years, and startups need to be heard. They want their voice to be heard, but especially in developing countries, it is very hard. I mean, if you are living in San Francisco as a startup, it may be easier to meet with a journalist, and he may be interested about you. Or if you are in US, you can send an email and they may take care of your email. But if you are living in India, Pakistan, Turkey, Bangladesh, Kenya, Nigeria, Philippines, if you send an email to a journalist in US, most likely, more probable, they won't reply to you. I mean, they may, but it is, from my experience, they don't take care about the questions that you ask. And it is always problematic because you start to raise 1-0. I mean, which means the startups who are living in Europe and US has kinds of ability to go forward, and they have the advantage. What do you recommend to startups to take interest, attract the journalists' attention about their startups and also stories?
So that is a fantastic question, and the email doesn't work. I mean, it just simply doesn't work, because if you email a reporter or a journalist or an editor, you're just going to end up in a pile in email. But what works is following the journalists with the entities. So journalists and editors and writers are Twitter people, right? Like, this is where the rubber hits the road for journalists. Like, we consume a lot of Twitter. So you need to identify the outlets, the media, people you are interested in pitching your story to, and start becoming a part of that conversation, right? Like, create a media list on Twitter. And I don't mean to be like Twitter, biased toward Twitter, but it works. It works way better than email. And become a part of those conversations. Like if you are in ag tech, hashtag ag tech, find those journalists who are specific to what you are trying to pitch. Don't just do a general email. Again, it does not work. I know that because I ignored all of the email I ever got when I was, being an editor. So
now we have many questions. Just let me open it. And this is a good question. How to find motivation to continue once you lost it?
I've lost a lot of things. So here's the thing about losing, cash burn, having your house burn, or, having to pivot with your business. It's the same thing you and I were talking about yesterday, Brock. It is, you have to be optimistic, and you can't be afraid to move forward, right? Like that comes from within you. That is a soulful thing, and you have to be optimistic. And the other thing is, and this is like, the fear of failure is such a motivation squasher, right? Like you have to get past your fear of failure, because once you get past your fear, on the other side of that, and I promise you, is your success, right? And so it's really just kind of embracing optimism and the ability to pivot, and knowing when to let go, knowing when to stop shaking, the remains of your house. Just stop and start over.
And there are other questions. Let me ask them. What do you think the most common mistake founders make while dealing the media?
So here's the thing, and trying to leave ego aside here, the most important thing is that you are one of a billion companies pitching the media, and the more you can clarify what you are trying to say and what your product is, and this is for all pitches, not just media. This is for fundraising. This is for investor pitches, for everything, is to make yourself a part of the relevancy of where we are. So I got pitches, yesterday from a company in, Avila Beach, I think, California. And, they got my attention because they actually put themselves in the middle of COVID, right? So they said, here's what we do, and here's how we can solve, the remote worker problem, the virtual, the cultural thing, the stuff we were talking about yesterday, Brock. Putting yourself and making yourself relevant and problem solvery is going to get you much more attention than saying, hey, I make this vase, and you just need to put yourself into the news cycle, and it will get you attention.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I mean, that makes sense to me. Hopefully for the people, audience as well, the question. And will you recommend a startup to invest in media exposure?
I don't know what that means.
I mean, probably public relationship management companies, or kind of intermediaries between media and the startups, because public relationship management companies do often make a connection bridge between startups and media outlets, if you, of course, give them monthly fee. So I think it means that.
Yeah. So, okay. So here are my thoughts on that, and do with them what you will. You don't need to invest a lot of money in PR these days, because there are so many wonderful platforms that are free, like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of these things. Like you can, with Hootsuite, or with one platform, you can post all kinds of things all over the place, and it doesn't cost that much money. Like, okay, I mean, I do a little PR myself, but you don't need to pay as a startup. I would be very cautious about spending my money on a PR firm when there are so many other technologies out there that are better.
Can you share any failure and how you overcome your failures?
Oh my God, where do I start with that one? I mean, I have failed more times than I have succeeded in my life. I mean, the main thing is, I started a company called Crybaby Media, and if you haven't heard of it, that's because it imploded. The most important thing is, honestly, it's going back to the fire thing. It's knowing when to let go. It is just knowing when to let go. Brock's kid. Hi, sweetie.
Hi there. Hello there. Hello there. How are you there?
Hello. Hello. How are you doing?
Söyle. Thank you de.
Thank you.
Well, that's the best part of my day so far.
Hadi. Dörtle. He probably saw on YouTube and came back.
That is precious. That is precious. No, on the failure thing, I mean, I have made so many mistakes, and I think that I failed, and I have failed, people and partners, and I think the most important thing and the lessons that you learn from your failures, you have to carry forward and not make the same mistakes. And there's even a conference in Silicon Valley called FailCon, where they celebrate failures and you share your failures, and I mean, it's really the most American thing in the whole world, but it's interesting, and it's a good concept. It's okay to fail.
In US, failure is a part of the culture, but most of the Asian cultures, I mean, I'm not stereotyping the cultures, but especially if you go to the east of the world, being failure, I mean, is not appreciated. Probably you have mentioned that, for example, for the Turkish, we have been entrepreneur, we have been also making creative works, and also lots of countries nearby us, the same kind of things. But failure is culturally not spoken. So and you don't share it. You don't. I mean, once Steve Blank said, "We don't call it failure; it is experience." I mean, if you look as a failure, and it's something else. If you look as an experience, it is something else. So, especially in the different parts of the geography of this world and the startups that we are getting applications and we have selected, failure is a difficulty to overcome. And you have probably seen that while you were traveling all over these countries. So, do you also have any comments about the differences between cultures?
Yeah, I mean, failure is the embracing of failure is a part of entrepreneurship. And so historically, the United States we're sort of built on entrepreneurial genes, just like you guys are in Turkey are. And so failure has, like, companies are going to fail, people are going to fail. Like, it's just part of like how we have embraced it. But the topic of entrepreneurship outside of Turkey and the United States is very, very new. Right. And so, like, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, like Denmark, where I do some work, they have a saying in the Nordic countries that it's called the law of Janta, right? And the law of Janta says that everybody is created equal. And if a rusty nail pops up from it, this is their metaphor, if a rusty nail pops up from the rest of the nails, it gets hammered back down, which really flies in the face of entrepreneurship. And failure is feared in a lot of countries. I mean, people just, the badge of courage in the States of failure has not really translated to the rest of the world, like it's just a really different and interesting cultural thing. But if you are going to create entrepreneurial ecosystems like Station F in Paris or in Malmo, Sweden, like, failure is going to be part of the entrepreneurial culture. And the sooner that you can recognize that, the more successful you will be with your entrepreneurial ecosystems. Don't fear failure. I mean, fear is the enemy here. Like, and don't be embarrassed by failure. I mean, I fail all the time.
It is easy to be sad, but hard to be implemented.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you know this, Brock. You've worked in Silicon Valley. You know the failure thing.
Yes, I mean, we have touched with many kinds of many startups from different kinds, different parts of the world. I mean, we are living in Istanbul. Of course, failure is part of this game,
Yeah.
but it is very hard. I mean, saying with words, yes, failure is part of the game is easy, but living it is very difficult.
Yeah, it's easy to say it and harder to actually experience it. So,
another question: do you have any example that media helped a startup to grow faster or succeed easier? For example, I should add that about the WeWork story. I mean, WeWork has probably a huge kind of boost and couldn't manage to probably cope with the last grow. Do you think that, for example, WeWork was boosted by the media?
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there are many. I think the problems with WeWork were profound. So I'm not really sure it's like a media problem or a leadership problem, but probably a combination of the two, because WeWork, that is such an interesting, it was a catastrophic failure when they went public with their IPO. And, it exposed, I mean, at the end of the day, WeWork was not a technology company, right? But the media represented them as a technology company. WeWork was a real estate company. I mean, that's really what it is. But I can tell you with firsthand experience. So yes, the media can absolutely help a startup, and social platforms, and yes, it can help you grow faster or succeed easier. Yes, if you are telling the correct story to the correct audience, absolutely, the media can be your friend. But know who you're going after, and make sure you have a very precise target list of media outlets that you're going after. I mean, I did an experiment with, there was a barbecue, like barbecue is big in the States and in Colorado. And there was a very small barbecue outlet in Denver, which is somewhat close to where I live. And, he's like, I can't seem to get past this threshold, and so I brought together a group of media experts, primarily social media experts, to do an experiment on what happens when you go out and you participate, in the barbecue wars, and you create these things. Like, does it really impact the business? And we also got some local media coverage just because of the things we were doing on social media. And what happened over the course of a month is his business grew 20%, which in the restaurant industry is huge. So yeah, media is your friend, but make sure you have a strategy and make sure you know exactly what your messaging is. So yes.
I should also add another example, Tyra Knows. I think Tyra Knows was Elizabeth Holmes' company, which was founded 2013. And also media has a great role about boosting this company, I think, because it was a bad story. I mean, it ended badly.
But to your point, the media made her into a hero, right? So she was a hero character in the Theranos story, and it turned out to be a bunch of smoke and mirrors. I mean, the media has a lot of responsibility for the Theranos story, honestly, and she's still not in jail. What?
Yes, I have read also the book about Tyra Knows. It is shocking. I finished it 2 days. I mean, the story behind it is very impressive. I mean, nobody can believe the backstage story.
It there are a lot of but to the point of this question, the media can be your friend, right? But you don't want the media to get ahead of the story, like they did with Elizabeth Holmes. Like that story was just, anyway. Okay, moving on.
3 do's and do nots for the team leader.
Okay, the 3 do's are, you jump in with me, Brock, but the first thing that you need to do as a leader, okay, so there's a couple things here. There are managers and there are leaders, and the two are not the same. In leadership, like a truly great leader, when you look at them through history in politics and business, great leaders inspire, right? Inspiration is absolutely one of the top do's. The second thing great leaders do is they listen, right? And the third thing great leaders do is they have humility, right? So leadership is not about being a strong man. It's about listening and knowing how to guide and direct your company. Things not to do as a leader. I mean, Barack, jump right on in, but micromanaging, trying to do too many things at once, right? So confusing your message to your staff. And the third thing I would say is, combining leadership and management, and that can be catastrophic for an organization's culture, because the leader's main thing is to establish what the culture is and to inspire people. And it will always emanate from the top. So every word you speak, every email you speak is a part of your leadership message. And, we've all stepped in potholes as leaders, but, what would you add, Barack? I feel like I'm just sort of...
I was just checking. Yes, I think Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People.
Yeah. It's a great one.
Yes, I should definitely recommend for the startups to read this book. Mm-hmm. Stephen Covey is very motivational speaker.
Yeah,
he passed already, but his book has been published many times. So I strongly suggest this book.
Iconic. Every startup founder should read that book. I agree.
It is timeless. The things that he mentions in the book is not depending on the technology or a specific sector or vertical. It is common things from a broad sense of a time. And I think lots of things to be learned in that book.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a good book to just have as reference. Like when you get into a spot as a leader and you're like, wow, which path do I take? How am I going to have the most impact? And, how am I going to professionally develop, leaders, the greatest sign of a sign of a leader is not just what happens at the company and what the financial performance is. It's what happens with the people, right? Like the greatest thing for me was when I would have reporters and writers who worked for me and would go on to do really awesome, amazing things and work for, Fast Company and do that. To me was the sign of success for me when people went on and did bigger things. Is there another kid in there?
Yes. So so what do you think about the sectors? This is a question from Robin Joy, about the curve of travel-based startups in 2020. What is the best practice we can adopt in this kind of situation?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head, but it is catastrophic, honestly. It is just a really rough year for the travel industry. And Robin, I don't know the answer, but I will look into this because I work with some hospitality groups and, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. Do you know, Barack?
I don't know the answers, of course, but I have guesses. Probably Robin has more exact guesses or teases that should be better than our guess, because he may be actively running a business on travel business. Yeah. We have some portfolio companies and they are struggling, of course. because
Yeah.
not only directly affecting, but indirectly travel business is also affected.
I mean,
And
but I think, like, Brock, I think also, you know, like my daughter and son graduated from college this year, and we did a Zoom. Like, I think even with the pandemic, you know, there are ways to bring people together for experiences, right? Like, and it creates, okay, so travel is not normal right now. It will come back. But there are other opportunities that are out there for people who are, you know, in the travel industry. I really deeply like watching how people are moving around right now in a digital space. It's weird and it's kind of dystopian, but I think there are a lot of opportunities. And I again, don't let the fear of this pandemic, you know, shut down your joy and your passion for what you do.
I mean, to add your comments to some of the question answered probably, I am very positive, of course. Travel will come back, but I don't know the exact timing. It may be 9 months, a year. Of course, otherwise the global trade cannot be working, and lots of things can be changed. While waiting 9 months, I mean, if you wait for 9 months, you should try new things. I mean, you should try test new thesis, because otherwise you have to wait 9 months or a year to recover all the travel business and to be back at the business again, and you cannot survive 9 months maybe.
Yeah.
So
so Robin, here's what I like. If you would shoot me an email, and we can talk this through, and I can try to find some numbers for you. It's amy@radicalupstarts.com. And you know, I don't want to leave this question unanswered. I'm sorry that I just don't know right now, but I will find out.
And Zaid was asking this question several times. So Zaid, I saw it, no worries. What is the best strategy when talking about yourself? Do you magnify your progress? What your take on that?
So, I mean, I have several different takes on that. I mean, I'm coming at this from a media perspective, and you know, so it's good to talk about your progress, but when you're pitching, even when you're pitching for funding or media, whatever you're pitching, it's good to talk about the progress your company is making. But in the essence of what we were talking about earlier about ego, like you need to show, like, make your company and your people and your team the highlight, right? And whatever you've accomplished financially or whatever the accomplishments are, make that the highlight. Yeah, like to you know, and I know this is it's different for everyone, but you know, when you, so here's a small story. When this was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I got a story pitch from an entrepreneur out of Kansas City, and his pitch to me was, I am a very deep and interesting person, and you need to do a profile on me. Which immediately I was like, no deep or interesting person has ever said that. I'm not doing a profile. So you really want to take the focus off of yourself and your personal accomplishments. I mean, although you know, take credit where you need to, and put it on your team, and you as a leader need to focus on your team and your company's performance, not on yourself. Is that, am I saying that right, Barack?
Yes, I understand perfectly.
Okay.
It was very clear.
It's a really interesting question, Saeed. Like it's not a question I've gotten that often, but it's really super important, and I'm glad that you asked that.
What do you think about the post-pandemic startup ecosystem in Asia? But the question may be broadened all over the world, or other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, since you and I are eternal optimists, Barack, I mean, I think it's actually like, once we get past this very ugly phase in world history and American history and all of this, I think there are just so many opportunities out there. And I don't think that we can let this pandemic define what the future of startup ecosystems are, right? If we're focusing on, oh my God, the startup, this is going to be a disaster. It will be a disaster, but I don't think it will be. I don't think it will be in Asia. Again, a very, very entrepreneurial culture, not in a homogenous way. I think it's going to create new opportunities that we didn't even imagine. And I think the possibilities are endless, and I will never stop believing that. I mean, I just think I think there's going to be a world and an economy post-pandemic, and I think we need to focus on the positive and the possibilities also. Oh my God, I sound like my mother. I sound like a Pollyanna. I really believe it. I mean, I really do.
Yes, influencer marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the concept of influencer marketing, and does it neglect the concept of influencer marketing? So what do you think about the influencer marketing, and should the startups implement that?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what your message is and what you want to be and what your brand is and what you stand for. I mean, I have done the whole influencer marketing thing where you go out and you pitch and you hashtag the influencers, or you at the influencers, and you know, I mean, it kind of works, but are we? Is it over?
Yes. Go ahead, please. No.
So here's my take on the influencer marketing. Like, I think it can be a kind of a sleazy tack to take, and I think that there are ways that you can build your brand based on not necessarily influencer marketing, but on your own content. So here's the deal, you guys. If you are in business, if you are a startup, if you are a founder, the truth of the matter is you are also in media, right? You have got to have your message out there on Twitter, Insta, whatever, wherever your audience is, but you have to be out there. And if you are with your own content, original content or curated content, or however you want to be, you don't need influencer marketing, right? Like, I mean, you can experiment. You know, it's always fun to experiment. So I don't know if that answered your question, my friend, but influencer marketing is a sleazy deal, and so you need to really do your research before, you know, hopping into it.
I'm selecting some of the questions. So there are lots of questions. And just a second, I'm
baffled by that influencer marketing question. I mean, I'll do some research on that. Okay.
Does a country which features or funds most number of startups in these days and age runs the jungle today? The question, Zoray, Halit, I think you are asking, you should clarify the question, but as far as I understand...
I think I get this. Yeah. So, okay. So the question is, so if you have government funded, you know, kind of bureaucratic, policy focused funding for startups, right? Am I reading that right? So here's my take on that. And Brock, I'm very interested to hear what your take on this is as well. But, you know, government funded entrepreneurial endeavors is contrary to kind of what entrepreneurship is, right? So entrepreneurs are, you know, these scrappy, they go out and figure out ways to get it done. And, you know, when the government is funding it, you know, in a way they're taking control of that creativity and that innovation. And so I don't know the exact answer to that question, but if you look at countries like Croatia or some of the Scandinavian countries where the government funds a lot of entrepreneurial ecosystems, you know, their rate of success is a little bit lower because it's not true entrepreneurship, you know, which is led by the founders. Does that make sense? Am I making sense, Correct?
I think so. I mean, we should ask them, to the audience, if they got the answer. They should also write on the chat box. If not, also you can do it again. We have many questions, but limited time. So for the last several questions, Amy, I have been journalist for 19 years, and now the age of 43, I have started a startup on open data. Is this a good idea? What's your opinion? It is very tough, I think, but I mean...
I think it's awesome. I think it's freaking awesome. And I'm not sure what your startup is, my friend, but data is like that's everything right now, and that is the future. And is it a good idea? I don't know. I don't think it's a bad idea. Like if you feel the passion for what you're doing, and journalism is changing and media is changing, and so it's really important for us as journalists to be able to adapt to a changing world. And so I think it's a good idea, and I think that you should do this, and I think I wish you all the most success you can imagine, and I hope that you report back and let me know how this goes, and go for it. Just go for it. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think it's awesome that you're doing it, and I am behind you 100%.
Amy, thank you very much for this great training session and also question and answer session. It was wonderful to be with you on today's meeting. And I think some of the startups may reach you on email and ask you questions if they have.
Yeah, please do. And I want to know, Polash, about how this goes with this data, this open data. And thank you, Barak. And honestly, I just wish everybody the most success and happiness and health. And thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Bye, you guys.
Have a great day over there.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amy. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.